Hi, welcome back to You Can Homeschool. I'm Tracy Hagerman, the happy homeschooler, and I'm here once again with Pat Fenner from Breakthrough Homeschooling. So we're hitting February. Ooh, how's everyone feeling out there who's homeschooling? Well, I know in our house, February could be a difficult month. Why? Well, it's kind of obvious. It's in Canada, we're still in the midst of very cold and snowy weather.
hmm
But even if you're not in that, I know a lot of places like, the flowers aren't out yet or the trees are still kind of drab. A lot of people find February kind of, overcast, kind of a downer month. They also talk about the February blues.
hmm
So, one of the things that can be done, and that a lot of schools, colleges, and that do, are they take breaks and extended breaks. So it might be a week off. Sometimes it's in the spring. Sometimes, college and university it could be in February. So the question is, we want to talk today about should you take an extended break or a mid-year break or whatever you want to call it. And we want to talk about some of the reasons you would and some of the reasons you wouldn't take a break. So, Pat, you want to get us started off?
Yeah, well, I breaks are always good. I think we need to sometimes, especially if you're using a curriculum, a box curriculum, and you're wanting to check the boxes off. Your kids have finished how many lessons or whatever you would. That kind of really gets, well, I'll just be honest, it gets old after a while. And February, we find ourselves Christmas is over, the holidays are over, and like Tracy was saying, the weather's kind of blah. And we know that school's going to be over in a couple months, but it's a couple months. And getting through sometimes in February, getting through today is a challenge. So um, I think part of what, while breaks are good, I think we also need to look at our personal home and family dynamic and see how we can be proactive about that, because it might mean that you don't need to take a long break, but you need to maybe build in break times in your schedule or in your routine. Because hopefully, especially if you are looking to build a lifestyle of learning, we all know, moms, that once your kids graduate, like, you don't get 3 months off in the real world, and it just doesn't happen. Your boss doesn't say, oh yeah, you went off for the summer, sure. It is never said by an employer. So so you really want to try to help model and teach your kids self-care in terms of creating rest when you need it, or when, on a kind of a regular basis, so you're taking care of yourself, as opposed to, we got to take a week off because I'm gonna go crazy and lose my mind if we don't, kind of thing. So that's kind of my thoughts in general about breaks. Don't wait till you have to or you need to, do it at a healthy time so you can enjoy it too. Because honestly, if you're taking a break because you're feeling desperate, you're not going to really enjoy that break too much. You're just going to be, a blob. So
Yeah,
uh,
and then when you try and get into it a week later or whatever. So one of the things we would do for breaks is I would start feeling that I was falling behind in like home organization.
mm.
Like it's kind of like at the beginning of the year they had this nice clean desk, and then you're working all over the house, and then it's like, okay, just go put your stuff on your desk at the end of the day so it's not in the kitchen or the dining room or whatever, so we can eat. But over time, as they're doing this craft and this project and this experiment, things get more and more disorderly. So one of the reasons we might take a break, and again, this could be for a few days, I would say, okay, for this week, we're going to take 3 days off. And so they're like, yeah, thinking they're just watching TV or whatever for 3 days. And I'd go, but
Yeah.
this is going to be our focus. So it'd be like, yeah, let's plan a few fun outings or whatever to take a break, but we need to get the house back in order.
Mhm.
So let's sit down and make a little plan, and here are some of the things that I'm feeling need to get back in order. Like, I want you to sort out your desks, like whatever. And also themselves, it's like, what have they fallen behind on that
Mhm.
they want to do? So that's one of the reasons we might take a break. So even though it might be a break from the regular academics, usually we would have a plan of what we were going to do in that break. And it could just be catching up and getting things back together so that when so it's kind of new and fresh again. You got a
Right.
fresh place to work, or that. That was something I needed. And my kids just felt the change was good.
Yeah,
Like they didn't
absolutely.
have to open their books for those 3 days. Or sometimes, a lot of times we wouldn't let math go. They might just be
Yeah.
doing one math sheet.
Mhm.
But the rest of the day we were, okay, let's devote, this part of the morning, we're going to do this, but then you can have 4 hours to do whatever you want for
Mhm.
these 3 days or whatever. So those were helpful. And again, we might do that around like an already long weekend. So we might add a day or two so it felt like they had more of a
Right.
break. So
And I love your project management background rearing its head there because you have a plan and this is what we're going to do. This, but and I laugh, but it's true. Just know having an idea of it helps to manage expectations, having an idea of what's going to happen, what's the plan, even if you deviate from it, at least you have an idea and you know what the goal is, what we're working towards. But I love that idea about using some of it for kind of like home management because I don't know about you, but I cannot work in clutter. Like I can't work in clutter. I mean, which you'd laugh at if you looked at my desk right now, but it's high on my list right now to just put things away because it just is too distracting. Maybe it's ADHD. I don't know, but adult onset ADHD, and I just get squirrel easily distracted. But I think clutter is hard in general, for people to work when you can't find your things or when there's too much around. How do you focus? It makes it hard. So that's a productive use of time, some time off like that.
yeah, and like you said, managing the expectations,
Mhm.
because I have certainly done that where, okay, we're just going to take, uh, we're going to do the week off like the traditional
Right.
schools here do. They'll take their spring break or midwinter break, they call it. Um, but then I'd feel frustrated because the kids aren't getting out of bed at all. They're
Mhm.
not, picking up their lunch stuff. They're not, like, and I'm feeling like, oh, we had this week and I feel like it was wasted because nobody did anything. And they were thinking, well, you gave us the week off. We can just relax. So, when you're talking about project management head rearing its head, well, that was because the experience of feeling frustrated, like we took a week off, but we're still in the same slump we were a week ago. Um, so again, managing expectations was huge. And another thing we would do is we would talk about, okay, let's change things up because,
Mhm.
we usually had kind of a schedule to the way things went.
Right.
But there was usually a week where, we usually would have co-op or we used to go to a Bible study. I went to a Bible study once a week. My kids would come and help out and stuff. But there was always a break from that,
Mhm.
one week off. So we would often use that same week where we
Right.
didn't have these obligations or there wasn't, gymnastics happening or whatever. And so we would look at that week in advance and say, okay, we have a full week where we have no commitments.
Mhm.
Well, how do you guys foresee that week going? And a lot of times it came down to they wanted to do a special project.
Mhm.
So it was like, I remember my son saying, I just want to, he goes, I want to get through my physics book. I like it. I want to just spend the week doing physics and some experiment.
Yep.
And so that's what he did for the week. And, he may not have got everything accomplished, but then for the next month, he didn't have to do any physics. And he was happy with
Yeah.
that. He was kind of like, I like it, but I feel interrupted all the time because I'm
Mm.
only spending a little bit of time. So that was the way he would want to spend that week.
Right.
My other daughter was like, I just want to work on my music. I'm up to date in all my school stuff. I just want to work if I feel like I want to just write music for the week.
Yeah.
That's what she would do.
That's awesome because that's giving them ownership and now of course you wouldn't ask little kids what are you doing. You do kind of manage that. So it
Mhm.
is age appropriate.
Mhm.
But that's at teens, even tweens, to start giving them that kind of ownership and say in what's gonna happen is really empowering. It helps them build self-esteem in a practical way. It's not a shallow, oh, you're doing good kind of empty
Mhm.
words. It gives them a good skill, to do that too, to be involved in planning that.
And my youngest daughter would always notice when the kids had a day off because I wouldn't tell them like, they had this, I don't know what it was, like a teacher development day or something. So the
Right.
kids would be home. I never told my kids because we usually schooled mostly in the morning.
Hmm.
So they didn't really notice till they went outside that, hey, so and so's home. But then my youngest daughter really got smart. And she had a friend live two doors over, went to traditional school. And so her friend would keep her abreast in advance of when the breaks were. So my daughter knew. But so we always had an agreement. I'm like, okay, if Erica's off on Friday and you want to spend the day with Erica, this is what needs to happen in the rest of the week. But I would also not overburden her.
Right.
It was like she gave me a heads up, and that was really important to her. She wanted time with her friend, which is she's extremely outgoing. She liked that time. So it was like, okay, I needed to be aware of the school calendar so that she knew the neighborhood kids were off, that she could spend time with them. And so I did. I really did, was cognizant of that so that she could have that time. It was really
Mhm.
important to her. So be it. We worked it in.
That's awesome. I love that you just incorporated all that. You know, it's funny, just because we're not in the school system and everything doesn't mean, I mean, we definitely don't want to bring school home, and try to replicate what's going on in the school. But that's a perfect example, though, Tracy, of like helping your student still, or helping your child, still engage with people that are not homeschoolers, that in
Mhm.
other areas or whatever. And that's
Yeah.
a very sensitive to her feelings too. That's pretty neat.
Because she was feeling left out.
Hmm.
Like they have this day, and believe me, my kids had days off because I was saying at the beginning, we talk about the reasons to take a break, which is
Hmm.
pretty much all we've talked about so far. But what are some of the reasons not to take a break? And here's one I'm going to throw out is my kids were aware that, the schools got a week off because for 3.5 years we were working in ministry, um, in a living on site at a place that we gave vacations to families in need. But we also had school groups come in,
Mm.
and so my kids, when a school group came in, the kids that were on site, there was always activities that they were doing. And I allowed my kids, because I had to greet the people coming, I had to tell them a little bit about the ministry. I would tell them, usually they were coming to volunteer half the day, the schools, and then half the day they had their own programming. And my kids were always invited to participate in the programming.
Oh,
And so that was another thing where they knew, like, mom, they're on break, they get a break. So again, I allowed them to have a break. But in addition to that, one of the things we did for a number of years, this is probably 5 years, these are the years I did not give my kids a week off,
mhm.
was because we skied every Monday, for most of the day, 8 hours or whatever. We'd be at the ski hill. So they were able to do this for about 10 weeks in a row, which meant they got 10 days off.
Mhm.
So for 10 weeks, they were having a 3-day weekend basically, and they love skiing. So when that normal week off that they saw, or at that time they didn't realize other kids had, because I just never told them that.
Right.
So I didn't give them a full week off because we were already incorporating that break. So that was one of the reasons I would not give them a full week off, because they were
Mhm.
already having it. And some people question me on, you're skiing with your kids, like, do they do school on the weekend? And I'm like, no. And they're like, well, how can you justify those 10 days off school or whatever? And I was like, well, first of all, we don't take the break, and second of all, I planned out their year because I know that the winter months in Canada can be really difficult, and I wanted them to be outside enjoying the outdoors so I would schedule it in such a way that we had half of our work done by Christmas so that we could really
Mm.
take a slower pace and do a 4-day week rather than a 5-day week. So that's a reason why we didn't take one of these extended weeks again.
Right. So what you're saying, what I hear you saying is, that's fine, but it seems to require a lot of advanced planning in order to get around that. Would you say you worked pretty hard at planning?
I'm a planner, yes, but I have a very good friend who is not.
Mhm.
and she would just decide that, you know what, we're taking a couple days off. And sometimes she didn't even decide it. The day just dictated. Because grandma called for someone, and then, you know what, why don't we go over here? Okay, we can stop at this park. And they didn't get any school done. And, all her kids, she was way, way more laid back than I ever was. And, all of her kids have done very well. Two of them are married, they have their career, whatever. And I always found her so laid back, but it worked. It worked for her family. So in my case, yes, I am a planner.
Hmm.
I tend to, plan out the year kind
Yeah.
of. Although I am known for being flexible. I don't believe you need to stay rigid. But I like to have a general plan.
Hmm.
But for me, that worked.
Yep.
For another family, I'm not going to say that worked. I just think, yes, your family needs breaks once in a while, and maybe it's an impromptu break, and maybe it's a planned break. But it's when you're irritable. It's when nobody's getting anything done anyways without a fight. um, Something needs to change, and maybe that's all it is a break.
Yeah, it's true. Like we're just not, I know we live in a very productive, conscious society. We always seem to need to be producing something or, getting something done, checking the boxes off, and everything. And that does create a lot of stress and unnecessary stress, I think, because it just makes to me, it puts our value on our performance. And that's not where our value is. It isn't. And we certainly don't need to be pushing that on to our kids and teaching them that. It's definitely more a question of, self-care. And honestly, I would say the only caveat with taking breaks, I would say, is just to make sure that the only boxes you might need to be checking are your legal boxes. Do you know what your state or your province homeschool laws are? And I would never tell somebody to, toss that out. Like, we are citizens of our countries, and there are laws we have that we need to follow. So as long as those are being met, really homeschooling needs to, like anything else, like the curriculum or the books or your routine or your schedule, needs to fit your family. And taking breaks is not, there's no exception to that.
Yeah,
That's the same thing.
absolutely. And also, I think there's stages of our life. So again, we're talking midwinter break or mid-year break, but there's other stages like having a new baby,
Mm,
moving, an illness either in the immediate family or the extended family. Maybe there's a grandparent that needs more help. And sometimes we need to pay more attention to those. And I think there's this, like you said, we're used to being so productive all the time. We think, okay, well, okay, I've got this new baby, but I still need to do this, 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 and this, which is not realistic, nor does it help in balancing your life and in teaching our kids balance later on. So there are stages and seasons that we need to slow down.
mhm,
And maybe those are some of the times where our kids need to take a little more ownership of what they're doing. And maybe those are times where we're not as involved in teaching them the math and they're figuring it out on their own. Like we really need to be cognizant of those different things that come up in our life that are important. Grandma's sick, my mom's sick, or whatever. It's like, yes, that needs to be a priority. So when they're, older and they're at work and they're in this big job or whatever, but they realize that, their mom or dad needs help, it's okay
mhm,
that they need some time off to go help them. Like, we shouldn't, we have this, yes, we must understand the importance of work, but not to the detriment of other things in our life that are super important.
oh, preach it, sister.
Like,
You're so right.
and
Mhm,
I think through, COVID that, is still seems to be around.
yeah.
I think those types of things are becoming more apparent,
Mhm,
to employers, and that there are needs. And I'm not saying that, somebody should be getting paid and they're not doing anything, but
right.
there are times in our lives that we all go through that we don't have control over, but we need to pay attention to.
Mhm,
And sometimes we're not allowed to do that or
mhm.
we don't feel like we can be allowed to do that. And we run ourselves ragged trying to take care of it all. So, again,
Mm,
should you take a
yes.
mid year break? How are you feeling? How are you really feeling inside?
That's the answer to that question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How are your kids feeling? Ask them.
Mhm.
And ask them, okay, if we're I feel like, you're feeling a little unmotivated or a lot unmotivated.
Mhm.
Do you think a break would help? And what kind of break, and what would you like to do on that break? Like, what do you see doing on that break that would help you get rest from this or help motivate you again?
Good questions. Yeah. So it's not a black and white issue. It really is depends on your family and your needs.
And
That's
another thing
good.
that might fall into your lap too is somebody who wants to visit from afar.
Oh yeah.
So, if you've got this special visitor coming, maybe it's an uncle or whatever, um, and you're like, oh, but the kids still need to homeschool. Well, maybe you can just shorten your day a bit because maybe that visitor sleeps in until, 10 o'clock or whatever. And so maybe you can do a little bit and then, again, plan it in so that
Yeah.
you can enjoy whoever that special visitor might be. So I encourage you, like, it's okay to take a break. Like Pat says, like, make sure you're taking it for the right reasons and you're getting done what you need to get done,
Right.
or having to check the box because of your what state. We have a little more flexibility where I live, um, in terms of hours that we spend homeschooling. But again, sometimes we need that break.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right. Good. Well, so now that you have your answer, we would encourage you to just take some time and think about that for yourself. This is certainly these gray, cold, rainy days, depending on where you live, they could be snowy, are good times to sit back, nice cup of hot chocolate or something, and just give some thought, to what your needs and your family's needs and what's going on, and then how you want to move forward. And remember, there's a lot of freedom in homeschooling, even in the most restrictive state that I can think of in the states. You still have a lot of freedom in how you structure your day and your time in general. They may have more material that you have to accomplish, but how you do it really is your choice. We do have options, so consider a break, and that's always an option. And go with your heart.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
So remember, you can homeschool, but you can also have a break too
that's
in your day and in the year. So take care of yourselves, take care of your family, enjoy your homeschooling, and have an awesome week.
oh, yes, yes. We will see you next week. Bye bye, everybody.